Welcome to the Sellernomics podcast, where we share valuable tips and information in the Amazon and e-commerce space. Each week, we deliver the best interviews with some of the top Amazon personalities in the industry to help you grow your business. Today's episode is brought to you by Gatita, the global leader in FBA auditing and reimbursements. Get $400 in free FBA reimbursements at gatita.com/Sellernomics. And now, here are your hosts, Rob Stanley and Lisa Kinski.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Sellernomics. My name is Lisa Kinski, and I'm joined by my co-host, Rob Stanley. And we have a really awesome guest with us on today, you guys. We have David Esral calling in from, I guess not calling in, videoing in from Epsilon Safety and Quality Consulting. David, how are you?
Good. How are you doing? Thank you for
wonderful.
having me.
Oh, so excited to have you on, dear. Thank you so much for joining us. So, David, let's just jump straight into it. I mean, the name of the business is pretty self-explanatory, right? Safety and Quality Consulting. And obviously, you're helping Amazon sellers to meet those Amazon safety and quality requirements. That's the topic of today. So I think the first thing that we need to establish here is what's the difference between Amazon safety requirements and government safety requirements?
So they're typically not supposed to be different. I think they're not intended in the most part to be different. Amazon will on occasion have a specific item that they think there's some legal liability and they just don't want to sell it. And usually when that's the requirement, they're not going to sell it at all for safety reasons. And it may not be obvious right away what the problem is, but they're not selling it. But what more commonly happens is Amazon has loads of people who work in safety and quality, and some of them are real experts and some of them are less so experts, and they do their best to train them all, but they don't all understand the ins and outs. I mean, I've worked years in laboratories, and so I know, I can tell the difference between this and that, between A and B. This is a problem, this is not a problem. They don't typically have that kind of training. So in Amazon, the government has regulations. Every country you sell things in, consumer products in, has safety regulations that you need to meet because they want to keep their citizens safe. Mm-hmm. And then Amazon understands them however they understand them. And that's what we would call an Amazon requirement. You'll find a lot of times you may go to a very big famous lab and they'll do your testing and you'll send it to Amazon and Amazon says it's not good. So sometimes the lab will actually leave out some of the testing that I don't know for sure why. I assume that's because whoever paid for the testing said, leave this out for whatever reason they wanted to. Sometimes they just don't write it in a way that Amazon likes to see it. So Amazon and Amazon doesn't communicate well. So they I think that's across the board. So they just say it's not good. And you're like, what do you mean? I went to the best lab. I paid top dollar for this. And you'll go back to the lab and the lab will say everything's good. And that's beautiful, except you can't sell on Amazon. Yeah. So that's the space where I work. That space between it's done properly, but Amazon won't take it. It's a very thin space, but if you can't, I coined a new word about a month ago, the last mile. If you can't get into Amazon's door, like the last mile delivery service, you can't make the delivery. It just doesn't help. I got it across the country. It's in the city. It's on the block, but it's not in it. Amazon doesn't have it. They're not happy. So this is what I do that nobody else really does. It's a combination of knowing the standards well. Most people read standards and they look like to me like when I read an insurance document, I don't know what they're talking about. I don't feel like reading 40 pages and cross-referencing, going back but that's what I do with safety regulations. And there, I find the little things that fall through the cracks. But also it's the psychology. That guy who worked for Amazon who doesn't like it, what's he thinking? What does he see? what's missing to him. And I've tried really hard to get inside his head. And I do this by constantly studying the complaint they make, what people responded to them. So I'll ask a customer, please send me the email that Amazon sent you. Mm-hmm. And they'll say, oh, there were like 3 of them. We keep answering. I said, so send me what you said back to them and what you sent in, what they said back. And I follow, how's this conversation going? And there's stuff between the lines. And that's how I find out what's really bothering Amazon. What can we do about your report? And usually it's usually not a lot of stuff that has to be done. Usually it may be a supplemental test, one additional test. Maybe a form is not filled in properly. It's just a little bit of missing information. Every time it's different. And that's really what I enjoy about it. I've run laboratories for years, and in a laboratory you run the same test over and over and over again, regulatory testing or industry testing. And it's very monotonous. It's the same test over and over again. You do that for years and like, oh my gosh. But with Amazon, they come up with something new all the time. And it's like, oh, that's what they're thinking. A new misunderstanding, a new problem. Yeah. And so I never know what I'm going to find. And and so it's much more exciting than, of course, doing the same thing over and over again.
Right. Yeah. Well, and in terms, I think we need to get some framework around what needs safety tested, what needs quality control tested. Is this like taking, if you source a bottle, let's say a baby bottle, it's the first thing that comes to mind, and you're sending it off to testing. Is this to confirm it's BPA free? Is this to see if there's a choking hazard with a children's toy? I mean, what are some of these products that are having to be tested?
So most any consumer product that you would buy at a retail store, and now you're buying at Amazon, most any one of them has some kind of regulation in pretty much any country you sell it in. Once it becomes a children's product, it's going to have more regulation. If it touches food, it's going to have more regulation. Food itself has regulation, and vitamins and medicine and medical devices, all these electronics. But if you're going like in children's, adult clothing has very little regulation. Children's clothing has a lot of regulation. Children's pajamas loaded, and a lot of people have trouble with children's pajamas. And then there's a subcategory called tight-fitting children. Well, they call it sleepwear. Tight-fitting children's sleepwear. These are very big headaches for people. And there's a lot of very nitpicky, detailed regulation on this. But if you're selling baby bottles, there's going to be some chemical testing, and there may be food contact testing. Could be appropriate. Pacifiers have tons of regulation. I never thought about it before, but a pacifier has a little shield. That's so it doesn't go down your throat. It doesn't go down a baby's throat. A pacifier or a rattle or a teether, people give it to their babies and leave the room. It has to be foolproof. Because babies don't have the reflexes, they don't know about safety and not safety. It has to be it can't fail. So there's just a ton of regulation, and a pacifier, they're sucking on it hard. There's extra chemical testing on the nipple of a pacifier, just because there's just we have to be extra careful about something that, whatever's in there, it's going to go into them. Yeah. So, chemically, if it can be leached out, it's going to go into them. So you want you want to make sure that that's never gonna you're never gonna have such a problem. A lot of times there's labeling issues, or labeling issues. I look at in a there's two sides to the coin. A lot of times you could fail because you're just missing some labels, but the good news is you're just missing some labels. If your whole first of all, let me just say this: most everything passes and most everything is safe, but there are, there's enough things that fail that that you have to, that's why they have regulations. If there weren't regulations, there'd probably be a lot more things that fail. But I've had people who have like maybe a container load of some toy, and we test it, and it splinters into pieces, and those are sharp points. You can get stabbed by them. They could be small parts. Sometimes there's just nothing to do. You have to throw it out, and it's like I spent $100,000 on that container.
Wow.
It's like I can't. There's nothing I can do. I can't make it pass. It needs to be redesigned. If you have a labeling problem, though, you can print labels. Most of the time, that's at least a solvable problem. So I mean, it's a problem. You failed, but you can correct it without having to throw it out. So I mean, and typically I think a lot of Amazon sellers started off small and maybe became very big, but you have to, when you become a big company, you have to change your mindset. If you're selling something out of your living room, and you have a regular job, you make some extra money on it, so people don't want to invest too much in it. If you're making a living from your business, and maybe you're making a really nice living even, maybe you have a bunch of employees, you really don't want to be, one notice from Amazon away from not being able to sell. Like that would really change your life in a bad way. And you really don't want to find out that your toys aren't safe, or that or whatever it is you have isn't safe. Because you could have just invested a lot of money in it, and suddenly you can't sell it. People have backdoor ways of selling things, but then maybe you really shouldn't be selling it anyway, even if you could figure it out. But you may not be able to even figure it out. You may just be stuck. So it's a very good idea to think about this stuff in advance. And in advance, I would say means before you take ownership of it from the factory. Factories should you should have in your contract it has to pass, and if it doesn't pass, maybe you don't want to deal with it.
David, a question for you. So if I'm doing all this research, I found these products I'm interested in. How do I find out if the particular products I'm looking to maybe have produced or made need to have this type of testing done? Is there somewhere I could go, or somewhere I find out that, hey, these particular items, like you're talking about baby products, need testing? Maybe I'm not doing baby products. Maybe I'm doing something else. How do I find out if it needs testing before I ship it in, or even take it from the factory and start shipping it? Is there somewhere to go or some way to find that out?
I mean, you could contact me and ask me, but what I would suggest right off the bat, first thing you do with the factory is just ask them, do you have any testing on this? Can I see your test reports? Somebody just called me today. A happy customer referred them, actually. And they said, we realized we never test anything. And the way they realized it, I know how they were trying to sell to a big retailer. By the way, Amazon is on the back end of the curve. If you want to sell to Macy's or Nordstrom or a regular brick and mortar store, they won't touch it without all the proper testing. Amazon was slow to get into this game, and I think and e-commerce in general was slow to get into the game. So a lot of people say, I've been selling on Amazon for 10 years. No one ever bothered me. It's like, you were lucky, you were lucky. You have an advantage over all your competitors who are just starting out, because, things are changing. And they said, we realized we never had any testing, and we asked our factory for testing, and they didn't know what we were talking about. That's a bad sign. But it doesn't mean it can't pass. It just means, this factory is not tuned in to making sure it passes, or maybe they just didn't understand what the question was. But ask the factory for testing, and then a very simple thing is every test report has a picture. Just look at the picture and say, is this what my product looks like? If it doesn't, that's not the right test. They didn't test your product. That's for starters. You're already doing good if you have a test report, that's less than a year old, and it has a picture of your product on it. Because some people, someone years ago was selling a doll, and they said, my factory says I don't need to test. They have a test report, and they sent me a copy of the test report. It was a test on a blob of plastic, just a block of plastic, and they said they made the doll out of that plastic. It was a plastic doll, and I was like, maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but no one in the world no one can accept this as a test report. Who knows what does this got to do with your product? We have no way of knowing that. So that's the first. And then I would suggest speaking to somebody who has some expertise. An Amazon seller would say they don't want to send it into Amazon because Amazon didn't ask them for it, and why they don't make trouble. Like, what, now all of a sudden they're going to be on the clock. But could find me or somebody like me who will look at it and tell you this, this looks fine, or this has some serious problems. But there's also, just sometimes everything's fine. You're still gonna have problems with Amazon. At least you maybe have a safe toy, but you may still have to deal with some Amazon issues, till they're gonna understand it.
And that is a great place to kind of sneak in and give a word from our sponsor before asking more questions about non-compliance. What's the word I'm looking for? Consequences for non-compliance. So we will get right back to that, David, after this quick break.
Today's episode is brought to you by Gatita, the global leader in FBA auditing and reimbursements. Get $400 in free FBA reimbursements at gatita.com/Sellernomics.
All right, you guys, again, head over to gatita.com/Sellernomics for the first 400 FBA reimbursements free. We are back with David Esral with Epsilon Safety and Quality Consulting, talking about how to meet Amazon's safety and quality requirements. So, David, you started saying, if you either don't have these reports or things don't pass, obviously the threat is getting shut down, right? Like, you're going to be suspended. They're not going to let you sell your product. But are there any other consequences of safety requirement non-compliance? Like, are there fines?
Well, there are other things that happen. Not everyone who comes to me is coming because they have an Amazon issue. People get stopped at customs. Customs has been much more aggressive. I would say, they've always done this. I noticed it right after the last presidential election. Maybe a few months later, I saw an article somewhere, more funding is going to Customs and Border Patrol, or to the CPSC, Consumer Product Safety Commission, for enforcement. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, oh, and then all of a sudden more stuff started coming in. Customs doesn't check a lot of, it's a shockingly low number, what percentage they say they check of incoming shipments. I'm saying for like a national security, just thinking about it like that, like, wow, how do they really catch anything? But and I don't know how to answer that. I'm sure they have a way of determining what looks like a higher risk and what looks like a lower risk. but they've stepped it up a lot. And I used to tell people even before this, like if you're a consistent importer, eventually they're going to catch you if you're playing games with them. And all the money you saved over 5 years, you're going to spend it in 2 weeks, and you won't sleep either for those 2 weeks. You wake up in cold sweat every night. But
what is customs looking for? Like downright dangerous products, like to be sure that nobody's importing weapons saying they're baby shoes, or are they like looking for safety reports on these shipments that are coming in?
Well, things that might be criminal, like smuggling guns, I never hear about those. So I think those may be happening too, but they'll be looking for a toy came in, a pacifier came in, children's clothing came in, and it has no test reports. And right off the bat, that's a red flag. Okay, maybe it passes, maybe it doesn't pass, but you didn't test it. Or you don't know you did. You didn't tell us you did. So that's the first thing I would say. If once you have tested it, you should give your customs, what do they call them? Your customs broker. That's the importing side of a freight forwarder. Mm-hmm. You should give it to him. It should be maybe with the bill of lading. So Consumer Product Safety Commission, Customs and Border Patrol will see it. They'll see there's all the testing there. But you didn't test it. So they might take a few of them and test it. Right off the bat, you're in trouble. Even if everything's fine, you're going to be in trouble when that happens. They have a very neat trick. The Consumer Product Safety Commission has a lab, probably a massive lab. They write the regulations, they try them out and make sure it all makes sense beforehand. So they run a test on your product, and let's say it passes. Well, you have to be an accredited laboratory for it to be accepted. They're not an accredited laboratory. Now, I know they know how to do the tests. I know they're all good, and in fact, it's scary if they fail you. Like it's a very uncomfortable thing. How could anyone pass you? Who would have the nerve to say you pass? Consumer Product Safety Commission says you failed, and you're going to argue with them about that. They wrote the rules, mm-hmm. but you still can't use their test report because it's not an accredited laboratory. So even after all that, they're going to make you go to a laboratory and run testing, so that's a best case scenario. So you passed, and you're going to be paying storage fees while your stuff is sitting in a warehouse somewhere, and just hope the guy doesn't go on vacation while this is all happening.
I was going to say, I'm sure getting your stuff back is not easy.
It could be, but you can't count on that. I don't know. I'm from New Jersey. I remember the years we're going to the DMV. It was the same kind of scary. Like, will I get in the wrong line and find out 2 hours later? Anywhere for New Jersey for a while, but we remember that we had governors running based on cleaning up the DMV. But so you don't want to that's trouble right there. Then you might fail something, and then you may be arguing with them about maybe they want to destroy your product, maybe you can fix it. Are you going to have some kind of fine? All of these things could happen, and I've seen all of them happen. And then sometimes the FDA might be called in. I've had people that the FDA runs, and they find something growing on your, whatever it might be. It could be cosmetics or food, and there's some organism growing in it. And these are very awkward situations to happen. Now that's one thing that can happen. Another thing that can happen, and I only seen this very recently, CPSC buys things on Amazon, and they have I guess people, that's what they do. You don't know you're selling it to the CPSC. Some random guy buys it, but he works for the CPSC, and they send it to their lab and test it. And and
Wow.
sometimes it fails. And
Yeah.
like I've never seen this level of aggressive, and there's nothing really wrong about that. I mean, it's supposed to pass these rules, and so either of these things had happened. Now Amazon's not bothering you. You know, this is the government, and so you could be dealing with a lot of problems just from that. So even though you got through the border, CPSC can still, or the FDA does it also. And it could be medical devices, it could be vitamins. And now when there is trouble, sometimes they notify Amazon. So that just compounds your problems. Another thing that could happen, California has a lot of rules, mostly in chemicals. So they're not going to test if it breaks into small parts or not. But in California, there's Prop 65 is most of them. It's over 800 chemicals. So if someone in California finds that you have one of these regulated chemicals and you didn't label it properly, or that you have very high levels of it, you could end up going to court in California. You have to hire a lawyer. You have to pay him, and then you're going to lose. And, you try to mitigate it as best as possible, but usually it's like 5 figures, $20,000, $30,000, something like that. Those are, because now California did something particularly aggressive. They, anyone who lives in California is deputized. They're allowed to sue you and collect part of the damages. So there are environmental groups that do this, and then there are people who just do it because they can make money that way. I've heard, I haven't come across such a person yet, but I've heard that there are lawyers that can make more money doing this than being lawyers. So you buy things, you send it to the lab, it fails, you make a lawsuit, and then you collect a percentage of the $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 damages. So if you're selling on Amazon, you're probably going to sell in California too. So that's another, or any e-commerce site. That's another issue that could happen. And then of course the retailers, the big retailers, the non-e-commerce retailers, they typically aren't going to buy stuff that doesn't have your testing. So there's several choke points where they can get you if you don't have testing. If someone does get caught in customs, by the way, or with the FDA, and they're trying to mitigate their problems, there's a problem, but maybe we can, get our best situation. I can help with that also. But these are all kinds of things you want to proactively avoid, so that you don't have a really serious problem with your business.
Absolutely. David, I'm going to jump in real quick because at least I'll give you a couple of examples. 10 years ago, I was bringing in batteries for iPhones. And at the time, there was a lot of issues with batteries being flown in and catching on fire and all that stuff. Well, I was shipping them in. So we were shipping them in. They get the customer and border protection. We ran into 2 issues at 2 different times. First issue, one of the new manufacturers I was trying out for replacement iPhone batteries had put the Apple logo on there without Apple's permission. So those all got destroyed. Second time, no Apple logo from a different one, but they had a certification stamp, which I think was CE, which is, correct me, what is that, David? Again, it's been so long.
European approval,
basically for electronics, meaning it's gone through testing and it's safe and all that stuff. Well, they put it on and it comes into customs. Customs asked me for the paperwork. I go back to the factory, ask for them for the paperwork. They send it to me. I send it to customs, and they're not approved. They had made up fake paperwork saying that they were, and they weren't. So then basically they had to send a battery off to Japan or something like that to get tested by an independent lab to find out if it actually was passing or not. Mm-hmm. So then it gets really funny. And this is all months worth of stuff going on. Finally, it comes back. It's not. So the only option I have is basically destroy all the products, right? And things have probably changed the last 10 years. Then you just say, yeah, destroy it. You're out the money and everything, but it's gone. Now, here's the kind of catch, though. One of the times batteries came in, had that fake sort of label on it, but it was part of a bigger shipment with a lot of other products. They won't take out just that. This was 10 years ago. They wouldn't take out just the batteries and send me the rest of it. They destroyed all of it, period. Really? So, and I had items in there that weren't even batteries. They were as simple as a cable in there. And they said, nope, we cannot take out those specific items. So I ended up losing $50,000 worth of product. And luckily I had to renegotiate with the factory or the guy who was basically helping me consolidate everything and ship it to me. And we started shipping things more in separate. And we made sure that it didn't have the label on it, or if it did, that it was approved. So yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from. It's a very unique thing to deal with some of these things. And I live in California, so I see the Prop 65 warning everywhere you go. Every restaurant, every bar, everywhere you walk into pretty much has a Prop 65 sign. So I definitely see that a lot out here.
Yeah. And I mean, we tell people, like, you can't test for 800 chemicals and stay in business. Like you might as well just close right then. But what we tell people is we can advise you what are the most likely problems that you'll have. And, so like you mentioned restaurants, if you're selling fish, mercury is the thing to test for. You need to test enough fish that there's no more, that you're not finding mercury in it. If you're selling jewelry, you'll be testing for, maybe lead and cadmium, maybe phthalates, depending on what it's made out of. But you're not going to test for 800 things. Clothing, you test for flame retardants. There's a lot of regulated flame retardants, and there's a lot of things to watch out for, and they can really mess up your business. And
absolutely.
So if you're having an issue with Amazon, I try to help mitigate that, and solve that. Having an issue with customs, also, we try to solve it or mitigate it so that you can, or with the CPSC or the FDA in general, so that, that you can put yourself in at least the best position possible. But a lot of it can be avoided just by do it. Think about this in advance before. It's a lot easier. I tell everybody, make sure you have testing. Even if you don't look at the test reports, just get a test report, and it has the picture and there's a test report. If you do that and just save it, you're still, you have something, when the CPSC comes after you or Amazon comes after you, maybe it's Chinese New Year right then, and everyone's gone for 3 weeks. Now, what are you going to do? Just get it now, have it now. And of course, better if you really look at it and go through it, or have somebody do that for you. But don't just not think about it, because someone else is thinking about it. And eventually it will catch up with everybody.
Oh yeah, it'll cost the business in the end. David, we're going to take another quick break, and then I want to hear more from you about what Amazon sellers should look for in a testing facility. What are some of the qualifications and what makes them legit? And then we want to hear bit more about Epsilon. So we'll be right back in just a second.
Did you know that Amazon probably owes you money for FBA reimbursements? Get $400 in free FBA reimbursements at Getita.com/Sellernomics.
All right, you guys, you know where to get that first 400 in free reimbursements from. So David, you had said something before about a non-accredited testing center, and Rob, this not picking on you here, but like the certification that they sent was phony, and like they weren't actually doing the test. Like, so what are some of these things that business owners and Amazon sellers can look for to confirm that they have a legitimate accredited testing facility to get their quality control done at?
So a laboratory needs to be, for consumer products, typically will need to be accredited to ISO 17025. That's an international, ISO is an international standards organization. That's what ISO sort of stands for, but it's really in a different language. And I think it comes out in a different order. But But they write a standard how a lab has to run. It's similar to ISO 9000.
Mm-hmm.
You see a lot of businesses are ISO, except it's a lot more involved. You have to have the lab has to have a quality system, which means a system how they do everything they do, and in such that it would be quality. The employees have a training program to keep records that it was trained. You have to have your equipment has to be verified every once in a while, has to be calibrated, and the calibrators have to be themselves accredited, and you have to have a whole workflow that you'll consistently put out the same quality results no matter what you do, and we also run not blanks. We run blind samples. We order the blind samples from an organization that has their own accreditation, and we don't know the results, and we have to run them and give them results. And you know, if you do it well, you'll get your results will be right. If you're not, you know, you have a problem. You have to work on them. But this is the requirement for a accredited laboratory. If you're selling Consumer Product Safety Commission regulated things, there's also the lab then needs to go present themselves to the CPSC for approval, and every lab is approved for whatever test CPSC approves them for. So if you go to their website, which is cpsc.gov, I think they're always changing it around. It's not so easy to navigate, but if you look typically in the business, there'll be an icon for businesses. Click on that, and somewhere in there, you keep clicking around, you'll find where it says find a laboratory, and you'll see a list of all the labs that have been approved by the CPSC. It's a few hundred, and they're all over the world. I mean, that's how you find a lab that's approved to do the test. I mean, it's a good thing if you can communicate properly with your lab. If you don't understand each other, you know, things can happen. Like anything. Like you would want the lab to be responsive to you, and that you can have, you know, back and forth that makes sense. So you can feel like you're actually getting the testing done that you need done. You always want to tell your lab what countries you're selling in, because the regulations are different depending on the and there should be there's overlap. So if you're selling, let's say in the United States, it'll cost, I mean, there's a lot of variation what can make something cost money, but let's say it'll cost $1,000 to test in America for United States. If you want to also test for Canada, maybe it'll cost you $1,200. If you want to test United States, Canada, and Europe, maybe it'll cost you $1,500, $1,800. But if you just wanted to test for Canada, you may be paying that $1,000. And then you come back, you know, a little while later, I need the United States also. Well, it may also cost you $1,000. Like if you're going to be selling in in all these countries, test it for everything right away. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing like waiting for Amazon to bother you. You know, they only asked me for US, so I only want to do US. So yeah, but in 3 months they're going to ask you for Amazon, and I've seen this a lot. Yeah. Customers come back, oh, they want Canada now also. I was like, I asked you, and you told me not to do Canada. You know, and now it costs more money because we did the test the less expensive way, but now we have to start over the whole test. You know, it's legit that it costs more money. So pay attention to that. There's a new regulation right now that Amazon started. I think I'm going off topic, but there's a new regulation on battery safety that it needs to be in a childproof container. This is something else. If you're selling batteries, you mentioned that you were selling batteries. If you're selling batteries, you might want to check into that and make sure you're compliant, because that could be. I have some creative ways how to solve that problem, but that can be an expensive problem to solve, and also could hurt your listing.
That's a good little footnote.
Yeah, I haven't sold in a while, but I do want to hear more about you guys. So if people are interested, kind of maybe cover just a little bit of, it may be easier to cover maybe tests you don't do or things you don't check, but give us kind of a brief overview for Amazon sellers, what kind of items you guys do test for, or maybe categories you test for, just to, I'm sure there's a lot of them.
Yeah, by the way, I've been in the conversation, we're mostly focused on CPSC because testing is in CPSC stuff, testing is pretty much what you need to do. In FDA regulated products, which is medicine, over-the-counter medicine, or prescription medicine, medical devices, cosmetics. Yeah, I think that's it. And dietary supplements. So there's also, besides the testing, there's GMP requirements, and GMP means that your factory has to have in a similar way that a lab has to have a quality system. Your factory has to have a quality system. You're making medicine. We want every pill to come out the same way. We don't want to have, this one has 3 times as much as you need, and this one doesn't really have, didn't really make it in. So the whole system, how they manufacture everything, that also has to be done properly, and everything has labeling requirements. You buy medicine, you see it has, even you buy vitamins, it's all kinds of labels all over it. These are other things that need to be kept in. So what I do, what I do that I enjoy the most is finding that little spot, that last mile, dealing with Amazon and other e-commerce sites. That everything looks fine and it isn't fine, and the harder it is to find it, the more I enjoy it. I sweat a lot in the middle, maybe, but it's very sweet when you solve a problem like that. It makes you sweat so hard, and that's that. Other things I do, if you want to set up a quality program, let's say you're a big importer, and you don't want to be reactive to everything. You want to have a system that actually means that pretty much all your test reports are going to be done properly. That you have something in place. Let's say there is a problem, if God forbid you have a recall, different issues that could come, making sure when you get through the border that you have all your paperwork in line for customs. So these are things that I do. Also, I can work by the job or the hour, or I have people who've hired me on retainer, and I just go through all their everything they're making, and we make sure that everything's done right from the beginning. Also, things may come up also, but you're gonna have a lot less of it if you're looking out for this stuff in advance. There's always something new that can happen. I can help people if you're designing toys, you're designing a crib, a stroller, or electronics or something like that, and you want to design it so that it's going to pass. So I have designers, I have product safety people who can work with you while you're designing, so that before it goes to production, it's like no, don't even try that one. That's going to fail. This is, or if you've failed and you need to redesign, and it's like, what can I do to solve this problem? So we have people who can help you, design so that it will pass, or adjust the design so it'll pass.
Amazing. Yeah, you're clearly an expert in your field, David. I feel like we're cutting ourselves off at the knees almost with running out of time here. We could do another episode or 2 on this, I feel like. But if you guys have any questions for David or are interested in working with Epsilon Safety, his email address is david@epsilonsafety.com. Epsilon spelled just like the Greek letter EPSILON safety.com. So David, thank you so much for joining us today. There's so much more to the world of safety and quality than I think people realize, but that's a good thing. There should Absolutely. Be more than we realize.
Right. And
definitely. Yeah.
One thing I like to just mention, a lot of successful Amazon sellers are very creative people. and they're creative people sometimes, and big picture people tend to hate details. Not that everyone will, but I love details. If you don't want to have that headache, that's a headache I enjoy. And I'm happy to work with anyone, or even if you are a detail person, you just don't want to do this. Happy to work with you to make sure you don't have these kind of issues with Amazon, or to solve them.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Again, you guys, it's David at epsilonsafety.com. David, thank you so much, dear. This has been wonderful having you on.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, you. David. And thank you for everybody who tuned in. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Sellernomics podcast. Special thanks to our sponsor, Gatita. Did you know that Amazon probably owes you money for FBA reimbursements? Get $400 in free FBA reimbursements at gatita.com/Sellernomics. Be sure to join us again next week for more great tips on how to grow your business. And thanks again for listening.